For me, a fictional world has been well designed if I can imagine myself being part of that world. If I feel a connection with the characters that makes me want to spend time with them. I had that feeling from the very first hour of The Last of Us, and it didn't fade until long after I'd put down the controller and watched the final cinematic. And that's no mean feat, because the world of The Last of Us is a horrible place. It's inhospitable, it's unforgiving, it's brutally violent, and it's certainly a far cry from the luxury and comfort that we enjoy today. The game is set in 2033, 20 years after the outbreak of a devastating human cordyceps plague. In the real world, cordyceps is a type of parasitic fungus that infects various creatures. But in The Last of Us, a strain of the fungus has made the leap to humans, turning the infected into something truly horrible and nightmare-inducing. The outbreak has led to the almost complete destruction of modern society. There's no electricity, no modern conveniences, and for the lucky few that have managed to survive, life has become very simple. Just do what you need to do to survive. You play as Joel, a middle-aged smuggler who's living in a militarily controlled quarantine zone in Boston, USA. He's an emotionally distant protagonist, a man of few words, and someone who's clearly been hardened by years of tough living and hard choices. A few hours into the game, Joel comes across Ellie, a 14-year-old orphan who he has to deliver to an anti-government militia who call themselves the Fireflies. Where Joel is cantankerous and guarded, Ellie is confident and wise beyond her years. She likes to think she can look after herself, and in a way she can, but she's still very much in need of protection and companionship. Ellie and Joel's relationship changes and mutates as the two of them embark on a journey together, and it's hard not to feel moved by their story.
Here, this make you all nostalgic?
You know, that is actually before my time. That is a winner, though.
Well, better than nothing.
One of the many things developer Naughty Dog does so well is the little incidental conversations that happen between characters outside of the cutscenes.
What about you? How you holding up?
Business as usual, right?
They're just little moments sprinkled throughout the game, but they're so vital in helping you feel connected to these characters. And they're often small moments of humour, which is so important in a game that's otherwise dark and humorless.
What is the leading cause of divorce in long-term marriages? A stalemate.
That's awful.
You're awful.
Do you even understand what that means?
Nope. Doesn't matter.
There's a cast of supporting characters here that really help to bring this world to life. And the acting and the motion capture by all involved is second to none. And on a bit of a tangent, full credit should go to Naughty Dog here for one of the most refreshing portrayals of homosexuality I've ever seen in a video game. The character in question is never really explicitly described as being queer, but that's part of the attraction. It's not a defining feature of his personality like it might be in other games.
I'm about done with you, homo! Ah!
He's just a guy, doing what he needs to do to survive. He just happens to like other guys.
Who the hell's Frank?
He was my partner.
And on a similar note, the game's portrayal of women certainly isn't perfect, but the fact that there are so many strong women in this game is undoubtedly a good thing.
The guns he gave you, they weren't his to sell. I want them back.
Doesn't work like that, Tess.
The hell it doesn't.
Throughout the game, you'll face the infected in various forms of mutation. From the newly infected, who are essentially just crazed humans, through to bloaters, which are giant monstrosities that can take you out in one hit, and who take plenty of damage to bring down. But for me, it's the clickers that are the most terrifying of the infected, and also the most fun to fight. These guys are blind and find their way around using echolocation. Make too much noise, and they'll sense you. And because they can take you out with one hit as well, fights with them are always stressful. You'll also encounter your fair share of non-infected humans as you make your way through the game, just people doing what they need to do to survive. The human AI here is actually pretty great. They'll change the way they're fighting based on how you're fighting, and they're actually really good at flanking you as well. You'll spend most of the combat using a selection of guns and a bow and arrows, and normally in shooters I'd find myself sticking to just one or two guns, but here all of the guns felt fun to use and useful at some point or another. And part of the reason is that ammo is just so scarce in this game. It's not like a Call of Duty game where you've got 400 rounds for your assault rifle ready to go to pepper an army of goons. In The Last of Us, you're lucky to have half a dozen rounds for your weapons, and every shot really does count. Of course, this adds to the stress, but it's the best kind of stress because it feels realistic. Ammo simply isn't abundant in this post-apocalyptic world, and so you have to fight accordingly. As well as your guns and your bow, you can also pick up bottles and bricks to help you in combat, and these can be used to stun an enemy or to draw enemies' attention away from you.
Yeah.
You can also pick up a range of melee weapons, and while these are really satisfying to use, they have limited uses, so you're better off waiting until you absolutely have to use them. There's also a range of incendiary devices that you can make throughout the game, and if these are used properly, they can be extremely effective. I feel like I should mention the violence here because this is definitely the most violent game I've ever played, and it's certainly deserving of the R18 classification that it received. There are just so many moments where I was genuinely taken aback by how strong and unflinching the violence is. You spend almost all of the game fighting alongside a companion, whether that's Ellie or somebody else you've met in your travels, and for the most part, they're actually pretty useful. When you aren't going into a fight all guns blazing, you'll be sneaking around trying to take out your enemies one by one. And there were few things I enjoyed more in this game than taking out an entire area of enemies without anybody knowing I was there. And it was always a disappointment when somebody would see me and I'd have to go loud in order to clear the area.
What was that?
Joel has a useful listening mechanic where he crouches down and can hear nearby humans and infected, even if they're behind walls. And this could easily have been an I win button if it was executed badly, but here it just feels like another tool in your arsenal rather than any kind of unfair advantage. As with the Uncharted games, The Last of Us features a number of puzzles spread throughout, and these are usually pretty simple and involve ladders and pallets and giving Ellie a boost to certain ledges. The game does a very good job of steering you where you need to go, almost too good sometimes because it feels like every second staircase is blocked off. But if you do get the chance to explore nearby rooms or to go off the beaten track, you should definitely take it. You'll often discover rolls of tape or bottles of alcohol or scissors that can be used to craft expendable items such as bombs and weapons or upgrading your melee weapons. You'll also find supplements which can be used to upgrade Joel's skills, like increasing his health or extending the effective distance of his listening mechanic, for example. You'll also find weapon parts which can be used to upgrade the weapons you've already got. You can increase their range, their clip capacity, or even increase the number of weapons that you can toggle between before you have to go diving into your backpack. One of the many impressive things about The Last of Us is that the gameplay just feels perfectly balanced. Just as you start to tire of climbing up ladders, you'll be flung into a firefight, and just as you've had enough of that fight, it'll all be over and you'll be free to explore the area and salvage whatever bits and pieces you can find.
Alright, come on down.
If I had one criticism of the way the game switches between gameplay elements, it's the fact that it's sometimes too obvious that a fight's about to break out. You'll turn around a corner and see cover laid out for you nicely, and you'll see bottles and bricks strewn about the place. And seeing things set up like that does break the immersiveness of the game a little bit and serves to remind you that yes, you are playing a video game. But that's only a small criticism, and for the vast majority of the time it's very easy to get lost in this world. And for one thing, there's just so much detail here to take in, from street signs to graffiti scrawled about the place, to letters and notes that you can pick up, to whole areas that have something to tell you about the world and how it got to be the way that it is. And there's no doubt this is a beautiful looking game as well. The environments are wonderfully rendered, and there are so many times where I couldn't help but stop and just take it all in, panning around to see the world I was part of. There's one particular moment towards the end of the game where I reckon I stood admiring the view for what must have been 5 minutes. I don't want to ruin that moment for you because it is such a pivotal moment in the game, but when you get to it you'll know. Of course, a big part of any game's immersiveness is down to sound design, and they've done that so well with The Last of Us. You'll go long stretches without hearing any music at all, which only serves to heighten the feeling that your characters are alone in this brutal and hostile world. The music you do hear is minimalistic and ambient, which completely suits the tone of the game. There's no doubt that Naughty Dog is at the very forefront of video game storytelling, pushing the limits of what's even achievable in this medium. And with The Last of Us, they've raised the bar yet again. I've been addicted to many video games in recent years, but none of them has left me feeling the way that The Last of Us did. From the very first cutscenes, I cared deeply about these characters and found myself lost in their world. And when the whole thing ended about 15 hours later, I felt genuinely sad to be leaving that world and its inhabitants behind. This is an immersive, story-driven, and emotionally challenging journey that will probably go down as one of the greatest games of this console generation, if not of all time.